Tonight is step 4, and we have Sarah that's going to share with us her experience. Let's welcome Sarah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Sarah.
I want to thank Ron for asking me to do this. To be honest with you, my first inclination was to say no. You know, it always is, but I'm always grateful when I get to show up for Alcoholics Anonymous, and just going to dive right in here. And this step is actually, I love that I'm being asked to speak specifically on step 4, because I'm actually going through my steps again with my sponsor, and I just completed another 4-step and went through it in a very thorough way. So I'm really excited to talk about this and share my experience with this, because that's really all I have. And all I know is, like, when I came in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous this last time, after being in and out of the rooms for so many years and not understanding why I couldn't stay sober, was that I never really made that 3rd step decision. And for me, what that 3rd step decision looked like was to getting into direct action, and I had never done that before. Like, I came into AA and I did the 1, 2, and 3 shuffle, and I never followed it up with anything. And it tells us right on the top of page 64 that although this 3rd step decision that I'm making is a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless it's at once followed by this strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things that are blocking me. And I had no idea that I was so blocked off from God and the people around me, and that I so desperately needed to do this inventory. Because the reason, the whole purpose of the Big Book, the whole purpose of the work we do here, is to connect us with a power source that's going to solve our problem for us. So, and the only way I can get connected with this power is if I get rid of all the things that have been blocking me from this power. So in We Agnostics, it talks about how that fundamental idea of God that's deep down within every man, woman, and child, it's already there. God's already there. The problem is I cover it up with everything else. I cover it up with fear. I cover it up with resentment, materialism, greed, lust, all these other things. And when I set down on paper the causes and conditions, and I take a good hard look at them, I can start to remove these things. I can get the shame out of the way, and the guilt out of the way, and the fear out of the way. And the Big Book is very precise and the instructions here are very clear cut on how to write an inventory. It compares our inventory, as if we were a business owner and we needed to take this personal inventory. It's a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. So what I need to do is I need to find the facts about me and my selfishness and self-centeredness, which is the root of my problem, not alcohol. I need to face them, and I need to be honest about this. It tells us that, it says right here in the book that if the owner is to be successful, he can't fool himself about value. I can't look at this stuff and say, well, that's not that big of a deal. This envy problem I have is not that big of a deal. Or this dishonesty problem where I'm always lying is not that big of a deal. I have to be honest. And if I'm dishonest, it doesn't affect my sponsor. It doesn't affect anybody else but me. I'm the one who suffers. I'm the one who stays blocked off. I'm the one who can't connect to this power. And I'm the one who keeps going in and out and suffering this alcoholic torture, and I can't figure out why. And this was, one of those steps that when I come in and I look at the steps on the wall and I'm doing that whole thing where I'm like, having to make that decision between like just going on to the bitter end or accepting spiritual help. This is a step that a lot of people balk at. But if you look at how it's laid out in the Big Book, there's very little drama in the way it's written out. I don't know if our founders did that intentionally. I would never presume to, guess what they were thinking when they wrote this. But the one thing for me is, like, if I think it's going to be dramatic and scary and shameful, I'm not going to do it. But the way it's laid out is, like, I'm just going to be doing some inventory. I'm just going to be looking at the items on the shelf that are old or stale or rotten and need to go. Like, if I had a fruit stand and I had a bunch of rotten fruit, I wouldn't want to, lie to myself about it. I would want to get rid of it. And it talks about getting rid of these things promptly and without regret. Not shaming us. I really had that idea about the 4-step for a really long time, that the purpose of it was to beat me down so you could build me back up. It isn't about that. It's about shifting my perception back to one of reality. Because one of the biggest problems I suffer from is that my perception of reality is false, like in most areas. And alcohol distorts my perception of reality, and I used it as a solution for a very long time to treat my distorted reality. And I can't see the truth. So I need this process to face and be rid of these things promptly and without regret, and to be able to see the truth. And it talks about how we do this with our lives. The same thing a business owner would do with his business, we're doing it with our lives. And it says we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. And it's very easy to see that I have all this failure stacked up. I come in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm on state parole. I don't have a phone. I don't have a job. I'm wearing my niece's hand-me-downs, like twice divorced, lost custody of both my children. So failure is everywhere in my life. And of course, when I come in and I'm initially going through this process, I want to put the finger at everybody else. I want to say it's you, it's you, it's you, it's you. So what I think is beautiful about the fourth step is it allows me to start off with my resentments, the number one offender that kills more alcoholics than anything combined, right? These manifestations of self the book talks about, and how does my selfish and self-centered fear, how does that manifest itself? Well, I get pissed off at the world. I get angry at the world and I blame everybody else. And that's easy for me to do when I first come into AA. I want to write about my resentment. I felt like I was almost tricked that this woman told me that I could sit down and write everybody I had a grudge against. And I reveled in this. I wrote like 27 pages about how it's my mom, it's the ex-boyfriend, it's the prison system, it's my probation officer, it's the ex-husband, whatever. And, it talks about how toxic resentment is to the alcoholic. See, I didn't know that. I remember from a very young age being angry and resentful at everybody around me, always angry at my mother, always angry at my sisters, always feeling like they got something that I didn't get, more love, more attention, more this. Again, my perception of reality is off. But I was living in this spiritual disease well before I picked up a drink, and I didn't know that. And when I pick up a drink, it solves that problem for me. The only problem is after 20 years of drinking, the drink stops working for me, so I have to find a way to treat the spiritual disease. And it talks about how we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. It says when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. So what I always did when I got sober was did it in reverse. I want to straighten out everything on the outside. I want to get the boyfriend, I want to get the car, I want to get the job, I want to go to the gym, I want to take yoga, whatever. And I do all this stuff on the outside and my spirit is dying. My spirit is dying. So what happens is when I don't treat my sobriety, which is the real problem, I stay sick and I suffer, and eventually the thought comes to my head and it doesn't matter what the consequences look like, I'm going to go with it. So what I need to do, and what I did this last time around, is I started from the inside out. And every time I'm doing from the outside in, even at 8 years sober, I suffer. If I'm looking at you to fix my problem, I'm in pain again. I start to feel that spiritual malady, that spiritual sickness crop back up again. So I have to go right back into this work. And that's why at 8 years sober, I just wrote a whole new inventory. It says we listed people, institutions, principles with whom we were angry, and we asked ourselves why. So that's easy for me to do. Those first two columns, boom, I could write all day on those first two columns. What became more problematic for me, especially early on, were those third and fourth columns. So, I wasn't aware that the reason I was angry at everybody is that there are these 7 parts of self that get affected when you do something to me. I'm living in this constant fear that you're taking something from me or that you're denying something from me. Or my image is being harmed, or my pride is being hurt, or my emotional security is being damaged, or you're taking a sexual relationship away from me. Any of these things are getting affected, and I didn't know that until I wrote them in black and white down on this piece of paper. It talks about the things that get threatened: sex relations, self-esteem, how I see myself. That gets affected. Pride, how others see me. Pocketbook, my money. Don't take my money. Even though I never really had any, I was always taking everyone else's. But now it becomes more of a problem. Now I can honestly put that in my column. But my ambitions, what I want out of a situation, or how I think my life should look. How I think my life should look, and security, like what I need to be okay. What do I need in this world to be okay? And so if you damage or you affect any of those parts of self, I'm resentful and angry and burnt up. It says, we went through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people really we're often quite wrong. And it tells us, to conclude others were wrong were as far as most of us ever got. And that's as far as I ever got. I could get to the second column and that's it. So my mom, I hate my mom because, she didn't love me as much as my siblings. When these men hurt me when I was little, she blamed me and shamed me. And that's all I see. I get stuck and I can't move past that. But when I go down these columns, it has the examples right here in the book, the Mr. Brown, the cause, like his attention to my wife, told my wife of my mistress. Brown may get a job at the office. A lot of that has to do with, self stuff, like the sex relations, self-esteem it talks about. And the stuff with my mom, when I start to look at it, affected every area of my life, my sex relations, my personal relations, my security. I felt that I needed someone to validate my feelings in order for me to be okay. I needed her to tell me those men were wrong and that it wasn't my fault to be okay. I needed these things from her, and I felt my perception was that she denied these things to me. So I'm burnt up. And all of my resentments look like that. Look what you did to me. Look what you did to me. And even now, in writing this out, like my sponsor had me do it in a very specific way this time around. She had me write out the names first, then go back and write the cause. And then we had to go through some work again and then write on each 7-part of self in this third column. And then for 2 days, she had me pray on every single resentment on that list before I even started. Because it tells us right here, it's written in that order. It says, the usual outcome is that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, then we were sore to ourselves, but the more we fought and tried to have our own way. And isn't that what really all my resentments stem from? I want my own way. I want you to act the way I want you to act. I have that playbook that I have in my head that I haven't given any of you. But I expect you all to know that you're supposed to fall in line with this playbook, and I'm angry that you haven't. Right? And but it says, have our own way. That the matters got worse. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. Even in an argument, when I feel like I've come out ahead, I go back into that pit of anger and despair and fear. And that's how the world and its people really dominated me. Until I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous this last time around, I looked around and pointed at you. And the problem with this is, I will never get free if you're the problem. How could I? I would have to have power over every person in the room, and the reality is I don't have power over me, so how the hell do I have power over you? So I'm expecting all of you to change. I want my mom to change to be okay. I need the ex-husband to change to be okay. I need everything external to change for me to be okay. And in doing that, I get dominated by everybody else. Everyone has that power over me. And I live in that, like I get these brief moments where maybe you do what I want you to do. But that's that brief moment of victory. Because again, I don't know what I need. And I don't even know what I want. And it always falls up short, and it's empty. It's hollow. And it talks about if our life, a life that includes deep resentment, leads to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. I will tell you, even today, that if I have a resentment, it will literally suck up everything in my life. I cannot be present in the moment with my child. I can't be present in a conversation. It consumes everything, and it squanders away every precious moment that I have in this life. So that's what it's talking about when it's saying futile. It's pointless. It's pointless. Me staying angry, what is it? I don't know, one of the Dalai Lama said, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That's what I'm doing, and it's rotting me from the inside out, and I don't know this, and I'm thinking it's having an effect and changing anything on the outside, and it's not. It's just killing me. And it tells us this business of resentment is infinitely grave, meaning deadly. Deadly. This will kill us. We found that it's fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of spirit. We're cut off from God. I cannot feel God and resentment in the same place. I just can't. I cannot do this. So, it says we had to be free of anger. So how do I get free of anger? Well, I don't have the power over alcohol. And you know what else I don't have the power over? Resentments. I don't get a say when they go, but I do have a solution and how to deal with them. I set them down on paper. And it says I look back on this list because the list is what holds the answer to me. And it says we become prepared in this moment to look at it from a whole new angle. I'm finally able to see the truth, or willing, I should say, to sit down and have someone. And I have to be honest. When I first did my 4-step, I had zero capacity to do this on my own. I didn't experience this in my first 4-step until I sat down with another woman and she did my 5th step. I was so blocked off. There was no way I could ever consider that I played a role in any of this. I just couldn't. I needed that woman's help. I needed her to help me. Now, at 8 years sober, when I'm writing it, I'm able to see these things. I'm able to have the awareness and see where, I'm the problem today. And it says, in that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. So it doesn't even matter if the resentment is real. It doesn't even matter that if I'm angry that I believe my coworkers are gossiping about me and they literally don't care about my existence and don't talk about me. It doesn't matter. That's still going to eat me up inside. Like, I have to... And that's what I love about Alcoholics Anonymous, that it includes the discussion with another human being. Because anything that lives up here and that doesn't get put on paper or said to another human being festers and turns into this giant monster that I cannot control. My sponsor recently told me that the most spiritual tool I have is my pen, so I continue to write and I continue to write and I continue to write. And so how do I get rid of them, right? How do I do this? It says, this was our course. We realized, and how do I realize? I have to go to God for this, because I can't realize that people are sick. It says, we realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick, though we did not like their symptoms of their own spiritual sickness, and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves. I don't exempt myself from being spiritually sick. I hear that weaponized all the time in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll pray for you. Pray for you. Now there's a huge arrogance about that. I'll pray for you statement, implying that you need my prayer. I'm above you. I'm better. I'm well, and you're not. And the big book says otherwise. It says I'm also spiritually sick. And it's not even really asking at this part of the book for me to pray for the other individual. I'm asking God to shift my perception of that person. So it says I'm asking God. It says we ask God, and it says ask. That's a prayer. I ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. God, shift my perception. Help me see this person is sick, and help me treat them with patience, pity, and tolerance, because I don't have the power. It says, when that person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man or woman. How can I be helpful to him? Again, asking God to change me, not the other person. Not even fix anything for the other person. Nothing. It's all about God changing me. It says, God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. And that's what the prayer is God, change me. Use me. Help me change so I can be useful to you. It says we avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. And if we do, we destroy a chance of being helpful. And we can't be helpful to all people. But at least if we can't be helpful, we have to make sure God helps us not hurt people anymore. Like sometimes the only thing I can do is get some space from certain people and not engage in a certain situation. But again, I don't have that power on my own. I need God to do this for me. It says, referring to this list again. So after I've written these 3 columns, I go back over my list, and this is the real work for me. This is where it got real for me. It says, putting out of our minds the wrongs of others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. So I'm putting out of my mind the entire first 2 columns, which is really difficult for a person like me who wants to hold on to that. And for me, justifiable resentment is the most dangerous thing I can possibly imagine, because I have an excuse to hold on to that. But when I'm honest with myself, when I'm truly honest with myself, I can look at any single resentment and find a place where I have been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened. It says exactly what we're to do here. We look for our mistakes, where we're selfish, where we're self-seeking, where we're dishonest, and where we're frightened. Though the situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Like once I get to that 4th column, it's not even about them anymore. That story has to stop. That drama has to come to an end, and it's got to be about me and where am I to blame. The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them and placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set matters straight. It's already referencing we're forming our 8-step list here. We're starting an 8-step list. And then it goes into fear. We've already touched on fear because all my resentments are basically rooted in self-centered fear. And that is evident by column 3 that has all the parts of self that are affected, and they're all fear. That's all self-centered fear. So it talks about this word fear that's bracketed alongside the difficulties of Mr. Brown, Mr. Jones, the employer, and it says this short word somehow touches every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. So just like, a few pages earlier when we're talking about the third step, it talks about how we made decisions based on self, which placed us in a position to be hurt. Well, we make decisions based on fear that do the very same thing. And then I play the victim again. And what did I do to deserve this? And it talks about how fear is this evil and corrosive thread. It is the fabric. My cells are woven with fear. I'm shot through with it. And it says, but did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? Excuse me. Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble if my fear robs me of experiences, the present moment. It robs me of speaking to a new person because I'm afraid you're going to reject me, going out for this job because I don't think I'm good enough. Fear will rob me of everything if I allow it. And the only way I can get rid of fear is go to God. So it says we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? So I look at these fears. And it says self-reliance was as good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us had once had great self-confidence, but it didn't solve the fear problem or any other. And when it made us cocky, it was worse. That's when when I'm terrified, I become more and more arrogant. I'm protecting this image of myself. I'm protecting this sense of self. And my arrogance, I start to become cocky and everything gets worse. But when I look at all the fears and I write them all out, like why I have them, and wasn't it really because relying on me failed over and over and over again? And then it talks about this better way. What is the better way to deal with fear? We think so. It says, for we are living on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. When I'm truly able to do that, when I'm truly able to give a situation over to God, I don't experience the same level of fear that I do when I'm trying to manage and control a situation. I just don't. It says we trust an infinite God rather than our finite selves. Just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him. Does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? And my whole life it was the other way around. I would take the most serene situation and I would come in there like a tornado, like the book talks about, and ruin everything. But when I do what I believe God would have me do, I'm able to bring peace to the most insane situation. And that has been my experience in the years that I've been sober, provided I rely on and trust in this God. It talks about, like, I have a limited amount of time and I can't really go line by line here, but it talks about, like, what we do to have our fear removed after we've done this inventory. There's a really beautiful prayer that comes along with it. It says, God, remove this fear and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And it says that once we commence to outgrow fear, not the fear goes away like I just took a shot of whiskey. No, we start on this journey of outgrowing that fear. Once I start this prayer, God, remove this fear and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And then once we've got these fears down on paper, we go right into sex, which is, and it talks about how everybody needs an overhauling here. This is not a problem of just alcoholics. This is a normal human problem. We as alcoholics probably make a bigger mess of it because we're such fear-driven people and we're driven by so many defects and we're so selfish and self-centered. But it says we all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. And so it talks about how we review our conduct over years past. So it doesn't have anything to do with how many sexual partners we have. It has to do with how we treat people. There's this second paragraph here on page 69 that says we reviewed our conduct over years past, and it has all the questions I'm to ask myself. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault, and what should we have done instead? We get this all down on paper and look at it. So once I've asked myself everything that I've fallen short in, every area I've fallen short, and then I go to those, what should I have done instead? That question leads me to the new ideal. My new and sane sex ideal that I want to have in my current life today. And it says in this way we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? And am I being honest with myself about that, right? It It says we ask God to help mold our ideals and help us live up to them. I remember coming into AA and having a sponsor told me to write an ideals list, and I thought it was like, well, he's got to be 6'2", he's got to, make six figures, he's this, and like, no. This ideals list is a list of qualities that I would want to have in a relationship, and I'm asking God to mold me to those qualities. It has nothing to do with any other human being. It has to do with me. God, and I have to be willing to have God help me grow, to grow towards this ideal. It says I have to be willing to make amends where I've harmed people. Again, it's already giving us that hint that we're going to have to go clean all this stuff up. And it says we treat sex like any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. And that has been my biggest problem in 8 years of sobriety. I go to God with a problem in a relationship, God gives me the answer in the shitty boyfriend or the toxic relationship, and I'm like, he's not that bad. Or this isn't that big of a problem. God's giving me the answer, and I don't want it. Because I want things to work out the way I want them to work out. So I ignore God's answer, God's response. But it tells us right here, the answers are there. We just have to want them. I have to want to see the truth. And when I go into that place of delusion again, I can suffer horribly as a result. And it says God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with persons is often desirable. Will we let God be the final judge? We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as they are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. So those old days where I used to call up and complain about the boyfriend and they're like, yeah, screw him, he's awful. No, I can't do that anymore. Because it doesn't do anything for my spirit, and it doesn't help me get to the truth in the situation. If I really want to seek the truth, I need to go to other women and other people in this program who are living in the solution, who are going to direct me and guide me towards the truth in the most loving and non-judgmental way. Because the reality is, that's true. None of us can appraise the situation from the outside looking in. And honestly, I don't think anybody in this room would listen to somebody who tried to. But the truth is like if I fall into that hysterical thinking or that hysterical advice trap and that venting and fueling and all that stuff, I can't see the truth and I can't feel God. And it talks about falling short of this chosen ideal. So I'm asking God, help me grow towards this ideal. But of course, we're all human. We're going to fall short. And it says, does this mean we're going to drink if we fall short? It says, some people tell us so, but this is only half truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. But here's the caveat. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are the facts out of our experience. I used to run around AA well before I had an experience of the 12 steps, and I would quote random lines. I had never done any of this work. And I would say, well, you're not the arbiter of my sex conduct, right? I had no idea what that even meant. And I would run around dating 3 different guys in the same meeting. I was horrendous. My conduct was awful. And oddly enough, I didn't stay sober. Over and over again, I didn't stay sober because I couldn't live with the shame and the horror of the life I was living and the dishonesty. That's selfishness. And all I was doing was trying to, fix what was going on in here, treat the internal problem and an external solution, and it wasn't working. So yeah, that's my experience. I'm not theorizing. That was my direct experience. And when I came in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous this time, and I'm telling you I've fallen short, but my ideals, I have done my best, and I'm not bragging, but I've done my best to be a woman of honor and dignity and been a faithful and honest woman since I went through the 12 steps this last time around and got sober. So, but I needed to do that because I can't live with that shame and guilt of being that person and stay sober. That's just my experience. And it seems to be it's the experience of most alcoholics. So it says to sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity. Because guess what? Apparently we're all insane when it comes to this stuff because we need to go to God for that sanity. And it says, and for strength to do the right thing. And if sex is very troublesome, if I'm having horrible relationship problems, we throw ourselves harder into helping others. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. I had to leave a horrible relationship at 4 years sober with a man who couldn't stay sober. And it was brutally painful, and I couldn't let go. I couldn't let go. I couldn't see the truth. And finally, as I was leaving this relationship, the one thing that saved me was constantly working with a new woman, because that quieted that imperious urge. And what's the imperious urge in my case? It was like, let me send another text. Let me pull them back in. Like, let me start another conversation. Let me see if I can just try this one last time, because every time I yielded, it meant more and more heartache. Every time I gave into that desire, it meant more and more heartache. And the women in Alcoholics Anonymous that I sponsored during that period of time saved my life, because they quieted that self in me and allowed me to get free of it. And it says, if we've been thorough about the inventory, we've written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. We have begun to comprehend their futility, their uselessness, and their fatality, their deadliness. We have commenced to see that their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. There's our 8-step list, again, being referred to. And it says in this book, you read again and again, that faith did with us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope that you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. If you have already made a decision, 3rd-step decision, meaning if you've written the inventory and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. And the reality is this: if I don't continue to do these annual house cleanings and continue to do this work, I will stay stuck and I will stay blocked off. And I don't want to ever reach a point where I'm so sober that I am not willing to digest these big chunks of truth about myself. I always want to be able to go back, to put pens and paper, and to digest the truth about myself, no matter how hard or how uncomfortable it may be, because I want to be free. Anyway, that's all I have.